Hi Tong, how are you?
Okay, thank you. How are you, Gurus?
I'm fine, fine.
Hey, Jose.
Hello everyone.
Hey, darling. Okay, just I'm not sure what it means to me. Oh, so is that? 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
We can start. I think apart from Chun's item, mine was first on the agenda. A lot of this has already been had async and somewhat between me and Tong anyway. Yeah, so I'm not sure if there's anything else to be discussed there with anybody else. If nobody else has opinions on this, if you want to voice over anything you'd written down, Tom. Or...
Are we talking about number 2?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think basically what we discussed was that we discussed previously shipping CI instance variables to staging, if not prod. This is CI staging variables on a different database. But if we're not shipping it, then I'm wondering whether we should like change the CI database to mirror instead. And I think that is what Camille has implemented in the POC MR as well. So does anyone have any objections to that?
Well, are you saying that we've changed the POC now to mirror the database schemas and only have one schema, or?
Yeah, it's a singlet. So DBCI migrating is basically it's a singlet to DB migrating.
I see. Okay, yeah, I missed that update. And then we'll still plan on using the schema search path to remove that, to make it difficult or to notify us of joins.
Yes.
What about the CI instance variables work? Is there actually something that needs to be reverted from that now that we've symlinked the migrations? And are we going to symlink the structure SQL files and get rid of the structure SQL file as well, or what's the go with that?
I think so. I think this is
Camille, do you want to clarify for us? I haven't looked into that. What is the current plan with the structure SQL files and the database migrations directory? Are we going to just have one now, or?
I'm kind of thinking that we're probably gonna go in this direction because it has its own set of downsides. Like, let's say like the Tom, what you kind of notice with schema migrations is actually like the downside of like having like two structures, like two databases, updating the same DB schema migrations and updating DB/migrate and DB post-migrate and all of that. So maybe there is like, but also like this model implies exactly how you can configure your database YML. Like your database YML, if you like, each connection needs to point to different logical database. If you're gonna point to with main and CI to the same logical database, there are gonna be finicky things happening when you start to try to load the structure into database because it's gonna complain that it was already loaded So
That's
this model
just
is like
the structure load rake task, but it won't be an issue for migrations because it'll just look like the migration's already run, right? But the structure load rake task, it actually loops through all the databases and tries to load each structure file. Is that what you're talking about?
yes, basically yes. As for the migration, this is I think it should probably work, but there is like this problem with the concurrency as well. I'm not sure like if we ever execute like db migrate concurrently across like many servers, but if you would execute, let's say, main and CI concurrently, it would simply be like a problem because you would be inserting probably like twice or out of the order. So if we go like with a single structure SQL, but use logical partitioning using schemas, the model has to be that like your single connect, that like you, for a logical database, you always have only one connection. And you can use many connections, but they have to point to different logical databases to ensure that you can always like fully manage DB structure or schema migrations separately. That's kind of like the impact that I saw. Another impact is like the DB schema migration. So this is exactly what Tonkyu noticed. I'm kind of like thinking that we likely should have like maybe common db/migrate, like a symlink as we have now, but probably separate DB schema migrations folders that you add your migrations into, because then you kind of run into the problem that you are kind of seeing right now as well, Tom.
Yep, we can try that.
How, when we're landing, how does this differ from what Andreas was trying to propose? Where, I mean, Andreas is one structure SQL file, one database migrations directory, and yeah, presumably you just run the migrations and they're kind of idempotent, and nothing happens. You run the CI migrations after the other migrations. But I still don't understand what you're saying about not being able to have a connection to the same database twice, because we will want to do that. And I'm not really sure why that's a problem.
Like it's very similar to Andreas' proposal, but there are like a few things yet to discover exactly how we want to do. For example, we did not yet define exactly how migration is gonna behave when you execute them across two different databases. For example, you have migration adding column to the projects, or adding column to the CI, or running something more complex than like adding columns like background migration. You effectively need to replicate this migration twice, and like we need to somehow figure out, looking at these migrations that are being added, how are you gonna handle them if they actually like work across two different databases. Because like the last thing you really want to do is like you have the schema deviation on production system because you are skipping some migrations in that model. Because like now let's consider like a simple case. You are adding column, it's okay. Like probably you should actually execute this migration in all cases on all databases. But now, like, what happens if you have, let's say, I don't know, backfill some data, and now, like, we are in this transition period where you have the GitLab main and GitLab CI on the main database server, still like there, but we migrated the CI tables and we are writing to the CI tables on another database. What we actually gonna do then? Like, do we gonna replicate the all migrations for the CI also on this, let's say, stale data that are on the main database or not? And like in what cases we would not decide to not do it, but then you kind of end up in the situation that like you have the schema deviation on the running system, so you cannot really maintain the same structure SQL on actually running system. The structure SQL kind of represents a snapshot of your ideal structure, but now if you are skipping some migrations on the production, based on what criteria, and what like negative consequences it has when you kind of update like only part of the schema effectively.
My thinking is that on production we cannot run any migration because it's part of replication.
But once we deviate, once we break the replication, then because prior to breaking the deviation, we will run the CI migrations, but it'll just look like they've already run, so we won't have an issue. I don't understand. I don't understand the consequences of the asynchronous migrations where it doesn't necessarily know it's finished a background migration, and then you kick off two concurrently. That could be an issue, but. So the adding column example is simple. You would just run it against the CI database and it would look like it's already run because it is the same database.
Yes, but like this is simple. Like there are cases where we are actually like migrating data as well, right? So I mean like my challenge is like that we are kind of replicating all migrations in all cases, and we kind of need to make a judgment call how much we are okay with like saying that this structure between these two distinct databases can deviate on different schemas, because this would be actually like the outcome of the behavior.
A migration that changes data shouldn't change structure though. So I'm wondering if we can just like separate those two concepts in some way. Like I agree that changing data is going to be an issue, but changing data against stale data in a migration on the CI database won't be a problem because nobody's going to read it, and it won't result in the schema deviating because the data migration didn't change the schema. So like you still end up with exactly the same schema at the end of it. You'll just end up with weird, inconsistent data, but that it was stale data anyway.
So isn't it both the same? It will break replication. It will break the streaming replication.
Yeah, I think we're talking about post the streaming replication, because prior to this, when we're running streaming replication, there will be physically no way to write to the CI databases. You won't be able to perform write queries against them. They will be read-only replicas. They won't accept writes. Our migrations will be writing to the primary database, and whether we choose to run it twice against the primary database is kind of just a detail that's not necessarily that important to solve, but it's after we change that and then we have this, after we migrate, we switch to having the two separate databases. We remove the streaming replication.
Yeah.
What will we do about migrations, I think is what Camille.
Remove the sim link, delete the CI DB migrate, roll it up, I mean.
Like we're not gonna remove the sim link until like we actually migrate all our on-premise customers. So until we actually don't have cases that people don't use a single database for all schemas. So we're gonna have to live like with this design choice for a pretty long time of like maintaining the common structure. That's why maybe like I think like I still haven't made my mind whether like common structure and common migrate is like the way to go, because like in this model, if you have like migrate and separate CI migrate, you actually kind of make it maybe easier to reason like in what context what migration is being run, because and it's pretty explicit that it's still like you have the deviation of the schema. The question is really like how you, in what circumstances you don't run migrations on another database effectively, that your schema search path is different effectively, because like probably like whether you run migration or not is dependent on your schema search path for a given connection. This probably would be the criteria that we would use. Probably you would add some kind of attribute to your migration to indicate in what schema this migration should work on, to indicate. So maybe this would be like the criteria to skip when you don't run.
Right, we don't want that to be the case for schema changes, only data migrations, because schema changes, we want them to be identical in both databases.
So why don't we just keep continuity and like make a copy of like after we split, make a copy of migrate to CI migrate, and then add a few more migrations to drop merge requests table or whatever. And then they can.
The problem is we need to support both for a year, right? We need to support, and say, let's say 3 months time or 6 months time, we're running 2 databases in production, but our self-managed customers won't be for another 6 months.
So they don't turn on the second database. They don't configure the second database at all.
I don't think we can automate a migration where they configure the second database at the same time as us, because it is a complicated operation. It'd be like expecting all of our self-managed customers to upgrade Postgres versions at the same time as us. They can do it ahead of us, they can do it after us, but we can't have them do it at the same time because it's a large database migration that requires like this operational steps and some brief window of downtime and so on. So let's say that in 14.10, we're running 2 databases in production.
That's right.
They won't, but in 14.10, we want our customers to still be able to upgrade to 14.10 without having to go through this operational pain of splitting their database using some complex documentation or even an automated solution we offer them, because an automated solution we offer them is still going to be operationally impactful, and they have to pick a weekend. It's a big customer. So
they have to do something similar to that. Yep.
I'm kind of brought like my kind of like expected timeline. Like in the 15.0, we probably can expect that all the new installs will use many databases simply because we can like provision and like speed that, and we should be ready by that. But only like probably in the 16.0, which is like another major breaking release change, we can kind of expect that we migrate all existing customers to this model with some I don't know, offline, online, whatever method we choose. But this is probably like the timeline we are looking at maintaining the all schemas on the main database effectively for time being.
Yeah, I think your idea, Camille, about like all migrations that change data are the ones that are the edge case here, and we can look at the schema search path to figure out whether or not they're appropriate to run in that context. In fact, they will fail because you're trying to migrate data in a table that you don't have access to right now. So I think we will be requiring people to write their migration to detect, like say your migration is going to run against both of these databases. You need to make sure that you don't try to do project dot whatever when you don't have access to the projects table.
Yes, but we can define that by the schema search path on the given connection or like on the given migration where you clearly indicate, and we don't actually allow defining many. We just allow you to define one, which kind of implies that you cannot cross join schemas. Simply, this is like impossible thing to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that kind of forces people to not write a migration that kind of joins between 2 different tables in order to backfill data as well. Although that begs the question about how do we go about denormalizing a bunch of data? When we come to wanting to denormalize data, we need to do it before we break the schemas. If the migration can't access both databases, if a migration only gets a connection to one, because the Rails app gets a connection to 2, but the migration can queue Sidekick jobs, which have a connection to both. So
the migration gets access to one connection.
Well,
yes, but like migration is like run in a context of like the specific database connection. The only case is like background migration that you have to kind of pass exactly on where you want to modify the data.
But we may actually want to allow people to write a background migration that can modify data across both places. I mean, thinking about the example of denormalizing data is one case where we may need to denormalize data across the 2 databases, and Sidekick is part of the Rails app and therefore can query both databases.
Yes, I agree. And like right now, and like we don't have yet model for that because so far people would be like creating, let's say, a class within a class to like we represent active record model. Sometimes they would write connection.execute. So I'm kind of like, we need to figure out like the patterns for supporting background migrations where you are explicit on the execution context. And like for the active record-based model, we probably would have to break our rule about like not basing on like top level objects. I would kind of say that like it's fine to base your objects on application record or CI application record based on the need. I'm not sure about connection execute yet.
Yeah, and the execute is the most common thing to do in migrations, and there's a lot of them because it just is often easier to write your migration that way. And there are now helpers as well,
but like probably we can kind of like expect people to use CI application record dot connection instead of like general connection to pick the right context of the execution.
yeah, but this is again weird. Like you're talking about when a structure change, because you actually want to run those twice. So like adding a column, you can't say CI connection dot alter table, like execute alter table, because that is not.
Yes, but like alter table is executed as part of the migration its own, and migration already has the proper connection set based on the database on which you are executing migration. So all your migrations will be executed just fine in the form that you have them today, like execute method on the dev app, add column, alter table, or whatever else you do. It's gonna just behave fine. The problem will be with others. Sorry. Okay, I'm back.
This is quite a complicated topic. Can we?
Yeah, do you want to keep moving? I think we have enough of an idea.
Let's maybe open like the issue about like migrations / migrant migrations and like ability to reply them, and let's discuss like the options, or maybe like because I think it's slightly different problem to the common structure, because like we may maintain the common structure, but we may maintain separate folders, or we may maintain something different. So probably like thinking holistically about maybe migrate and fallout of running across different databases plus migrant migrations, and like how we want to model existing workflows for migrant migrations would be like a good way like to keep us focused. Does it make sense?
Yeah, you already have an issue about structure SQL being the same, and then you just want another issue that about database migrations being separate. But
yes,
I think
like because I think we can treat this problem separately, looking at like how we want to replay migrations simply and when.
that makes sense. Are you going to follow up and create that issue to continue that conversation?
Sure.
Okay. Tom, you're up next.
All right, thank you. So I think we were asking, we needed to decide if tags should be on the CI database. I think the answer is yes. So let me know the object. Otherwise, we will remove it. And also, we will ban access tag away from being used again.
So I have a question. What's the biggest problem with taggings? Because we use tagging syntax in multiple places. I just wonder what's the biggest problem right now with
the biggest problem right now is that it doesn't support multiple databases.
Yeah, okay, I understand that, but it's like, okay. Because in case of queuing, we can solve that through the work we are doing right now, that normalizes taggings into CI tables, right? So this would move information about tags already. Yeah, but if the problem is that we need to fix act as taggable, then it makes sense.
Yeah. And the only usage is CI. So
Yes, the usage is CI, but also there are like in a few places we do filtering based on tags. So like CI is main user, all that. So I think it just makes sense to keep it like close to the CI. And we also kind of see that I think this is my perspective that like in the current form taggings, the way how they are implemented, they are not really super great like for the scale of the GitLab. So in case of the projects, it just may be simpler to have, I don't know, an array of strings on a project or whatever else that just doesn't need like this fully normalized structure. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe overall in the future, we may kind of simply work our way on completely moving away from taggings as a pattern to be used. Because I think it kind of, in a lot of cases, creates more complication that it helps.
That makes
Okay.
sense to me.
Camille, number 4.
Yes, we didn't make a decision on deployments and environments, and I see like some amount of the failures is due to these tables. I'm kind of like raising awareness of that. I don't know about this one.
My intuition was they probably should be moved in a little bit. I looked at it, but how can we figure out if it'll be easier to move or not move? Like if we move it, how many? Okay, like it'd be good to quantify how many joins in and outside of CI we have. Seems like I mean, just based on how I understand those features, they're so linked to CI that I just really can't see why they'd be all that valuable to have outside of CI.
Yeah, I mean, it's not straightforward to write a script to see like what the transitive things are and how many links are, because it's not just deployments, it's deployments to environments to projects. So all these transitive things we got to take into account. So the total number of those associations, and how many of those.
Yeah, security definitely gets more complicated, but security, like I agree that we don't want to tie that to CI stuff because those features have a life of their own outside of CI. Environments and deployments are just so simple that, and really just tied to builds, I think we can probably move them. But yeah.
So yeah, that's the current associations is one thing. The other thing is like future features. In terms of
if it's like kind of mapped to our org chart pretty well as well, that they're in CI kind of
in the ops section.
Yeah. Then I think it makes sense to move them.
Yeah, just looking at that, yeah, I kind of agree. But then are we calling our CI database the ops database? So I'm not sure.
Yeah, if we move to environments and deployments, we might have to move Kubernetes clusters. They don't have CI in front of them either, and they will join to those things a lot. Well, that can only really be answered empirically, I guess. That's just maybe needs to be broken out as one more item to do on that merge request is for somebody specifically to tackle that on their own and just go, what is easier?
Makes sense.
I have one more agenda item after this. Well, there's a couple more, but nobody else is present. Which is like tactical about how we want to deal with that merge request we currently have open. I kind of find it weird to try to be fixing things and pushing them to that merge request, because my concern is we get to the end of that and we still need to break it up, right? And we still need people to review thousands of lines of changes, but across hundreds of merge requests, and we can't. And then we're like, we end up delaying things much more. We have something that works, but when it works, that's not the endpoint because we still have to break it up into hundreds of merge requests. So,
I'm kind of thinking that like right now, like even on this MR, like it's pretty apparent what sum of changes we need to make. So we can simply like kind of split our focus on like maybe me and Tong, or like me or Tong just making this more green over time, and like other people just kind of going and chipping, biting some aspects of that, like application record probably being one, some connections being another. I know, Tong, that you started fixing some features that do cross joins. Another thing could be like disable joins. These are the things that we can kind of like start biting out of that MR. So kind of like split the focus on the group of people that is trying to keep this as green as possible, on a group of people that kind of like bites aspects of that into smaller MRs that like we keep merging into master, and like we keep rebasing
so
on top of master.
I think, Camille, if you have like the higher level view of it, and maybe Tom does as well, and since you're in alternative time zones, you don't overlap, you don't conflict with each other much. Maybe it makes sense for you to be like kind of leaving an inline comment and saying this is a thing that can be split out. Like I fixed it right here, but it can be split out, and then I can just go ahead and tackle all of the inline comments you have and go. I can just create the merge requests, create the tests, assign the right team, and get it through review that way.
Yes, I was kind of thinking that like we start kind of commenting extensively on the things to fix, like the more we get code coverage, because like I think we are still like in this chaos with this MR on like trying to figure out like the approach to structure SQL, some queries, some tables, and things like that. So I was kind of thinking that like we just kind of try to get on top of this chaos like for a few more days till we have something that kind of resembles probably closely what we want to achieve, and then we kind of start commenting and chipping away these follow-ups items and like kind of assigning ourselves to these follow-up items. Like if you ask particularly about right now, I think we could probably define a bunch of the things out of this MR already if you are very keen into looking at that. But like in my head it was like that, like I just want to make it like more complete on like the architecture, because it's then much easier to reason about like migrations and problems, like how we discover joins, what tables are there, because we still have like this kind of like resolved comments about like deployments, environments, taggings. I think we resolved, and there are like a few more tests to solve to actually to see like which one of these directions is like the most probable ones. Maybe not the final, but most likely.
I wonder if we can use like a format to mark the things that are ready for somebody to just do. Like, because there's the high level big problems you're talking about solving, and it doesn't make sense for other people to tackle those outside of this merge request because they're big things. But if there's like smaller things inside this merge request or things that we've already decided on and they're just part of this merge request, we can just leave a comment with a specific format and say, then that means somebody can pick that up. They can create the issue, so that doesn't leave you with having to create hundreds of issues for everybody. They can create the issue, they can create the merge request and follow it through. You just described it.
Yeah, I like the structured idea as well. Like it could be something as simple as to do issue, and if there's an issue. If there's no issue, something else picks it up and creates an issue. But I'm thinking that anyone within Sharding group has the context to pick anything up right now. That's fine. Where we want to get more complete is when we start farming out to other groups. It has to be in a more stable state. Otherwise, there are a lot of questions, more questions than answers.
Yeah, but there might be things that could be farmed out to other teams now, but what you actually need is somebody in our team to define that, write it down really clearly for the other team, and be the person who answers their questions and say, like, we need you to change this feature to stop joining from here to here. I'll describe to you the problem we ran into. Here's a possible solution, but you need to figure this out yourself.
Yep.
And then
That's good.
then we can distribute the work of distributing work between us as well.
Yep.
Yes, and like that's the tricky part about like the because like there are clearly like cases where we can make it, and like Tom, like I know like you, for example, comment about like how many IDs we plug to kind of provide a limit. This is like the valid question to have, like how we handle these cases, because you're gonna have to plug in a few cases through race. But then like the question is also like, or maybe I'm kind of like overarching that. Maybe we can like identify these places where we clearly have to do cross joins, and we plug IDs and like we just ask for changing them.
Yeah, that's a good example, right? The last thing I want is 1,000 MRs going plug, and then we change our minds, and then we have to go find all the places and change plug again. Ideally, we make the first few MRs that have some sort of help method that at least solidifies this, and then it's less of a hassle. Something like that. But
Well,
either way, it will require someone from this group to shepherd the first few MRs.
I think if we have like a few and enough examples like this, the pattern will emerge. That's kind of how I'm hoping it comes out, right?
Oh,
Like,
okay. So I have this suggestion. Maybe it's gonna be counterintuitive. Right now, out of this POC, as for the feature, I'm most worried about the security set of the features, because they are, I think, mostly affected. Would you make sense, like, for example, you, Dylan, or Tong, while I kind of work in something different, to focus on this aspect of the POC, on figuring out the structure and like documenting that to the team, kind of reaching early to the team on security features, because like we need to make, I think, a bunch of the normalization on these features. So maybe instead of like thinking about the small problems, let's kind of focus on these major problems to solve and reach these teams early. So if you would, some of you could like focus on this particular topic as a like single person, owning that part of the specs, the structure and the changes, and like documenting that and reaching to the team. I think this would be the most beneficial, while we kind of chip away the smaller items concurrently on, let's say, things that are more undefined yet, but we'll kind of reduce the risk on this one major item that I kind of foresee right now.
that makes sense. I think, yeah. I can at least create an issue for that, and then we can add it to the current priorities, which is just say like, this is de-risking, we're trying to do it early and we want to get involvement early. And yeah, whoever picks that up will collaborate with secure to figure this out.
Because like I think we have pretty good general understanding like what's gonna be forbidden. We can investigate the structure, kind of use POC as a testing ground. But I think they're gonna have to be done a bunch of the normalization there, and we have to do it earlier with our help, or we have to do it. I don't know yet.
Can you leave an inline comment or something with just the thing you've seen that makes you go, okay, I know this is a big problem, and just that will just start me off, and then I can use that to create the issue, talk about denormalization, talk about different options, and then I'll find the right people to communicate it to.
Cool. Let me show you. It's gonna be faster.
Okay.
So latest version. I'm kind of like noticed this pattern, and I know that this is gonna be problematic. I'm just trying to find a place where it was. MR gets big. Okay, not this one. Finding. Not this one.
I think you mentioned actually that there's a pattern where they haven't denormalized project ID in a bunch of places, right? That's
Yes, latest successful by build. They are joining security scans and they are joining CI builds to find the security scans that are latest successful.
Can you just add an inline comment mentioning me now, and then I can just remember that tomorrow?
This is one of the examples, like the main one, but there are other ones that they are kind of cross-joining vulnerability scans through build to find a project as well. So this will also not be possible.
That one's easier to fix with denormalizing. This one that you just described might be trickier. I'll have to think about it.
It probably requires a design change where like you kind of work more on the event-based system instead of like greedy dynamic approach as it is now. So this is something that we have to be changed, I'm pretty sure.
I'm happy with that as an action here to split things out, but there's more people in the team that maybe also want more things like that to get split out to contribute without trying to push to this branch.
So I would kind of propose that like me and Tom, like we continue like for a few more days, like I don't know, to Monday, Tuesday, get this POC more green than it is. Like we are kind of don't have overlap on time zones that much, so I think it should be acceptable. And then like we on the next meeting on Monday or Wednesday, we kind of decide on, let's say, starting to chip away, by the way, issues out of the big MR and work on these like structural things that we could merge. That would be my proposal.
That sounds good to me.
Then like we have the Parir, which is joining us. I think we should invite him to this meeting. I'm not sure if it's his time zone.
Who's joining us?
Parir from database team. He will be actually working with us day by day on the database. So I think that next week we're gonna have more like also like things on the database side that needs to be fixed as well. Pat Bayer. Okay.
Yeah, I figured who you were talking about. Okay, is there anything else then on the agenda, or are we done? All right, I'm gonna go to dinner. Thanks for the chat.
See you. Have a good day.